Okay, sorry. So, good afternoon. Sorry for that little delay. We're just trying to sort out some technical back-end issues. Beautiful. Yeah. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And it's such a great pleasure to be back with you today on Live and Direct. If you can recall, this was meant to have happened 2 weeks ago, but in honor of our late friend, great man, Martin Mabutho, we had to defer this till today. We pray that his soul rests in peace. Femi and I share a lot of things in common with Martin. That's why that was very important for us. And it's glad to be back having this conversation. Today is a very, very interesting day. I'm having on board my brother, my soulmate, my creative soulmate, somebody with whom we go way, way, way back. We've always, every time we meet, we can't help but talk about the industry, talk about production, talk about, the state of creativity in Nigeria. And I've seen him, traverse a lot of different spheres. And I'm always delighted when he's onto something new. He never stops being onto, he's onto also many things. I mean, I can't mention all of them. But if there's anybody who can actually give a good take on our industry across different spheres, I don't think there are too many of them like Femi Odugbemi. Femi Odugbemi, it's a great pleasure to have you on board. Femi goes way back from film school to a short stint at NTA and coming into advertising, first content business from the advertising industry, audiovisual first, if I remember. And he moved on from there to produce great feat, I must say. And he's done that. He's gone on to do other content beyond that. Battleground, over 400 episodes of Battleground across the continent. And of course, Brethren came after that, and he's doing so many things. Most importantly, is Femi's interest in the future of creativity and the creative industry. At the moment, he's the director of the Mnet Multi-Choice Talent Factory, which has been producing a lot of people, new generation of film producers, content makers. So we can go on and on. Question for me, Femi, is this: you appear like a very restless soul, but was all of this by design? From film school, did you know that you end up doing advertising and go back to your of TV and film production?
Thank you. First of all, I just want to say thank you for inviting me here. I'm always delighted to be involved with anything that has to do with the AAN. I really do truly appreciate the progress that I think the association and the industry has made, since the time that I was in advertising. And more than anything else, the LAIF Awards was something that, I also was involved with in the beginning. And for me, that is perhaps one of the most important things that the AAN can do, because it sows into the future excellence and showcases the kind of ambition that we have to continue to have creatively, and to celebrate those who are, facing forward that way. But more than anything else, that I've accepted to come here mostly because of you. Like you say, you and I have walked quite a journey creating together. But I think it's not the length of time of that journey, it's how much that journey has been enriching for both of us. So I do think those conversations we have when we get together are in fact very important to challenging both of us to try and be true to our words, to live according to, the kind of ambitions that we express to each other. So I want to say thank you. Your question about whether I always knew. I don't know. I don't know if I can honestly and truthfully say I knew specifically that I would be in broadcast or in advertising or in production. I always knew that I would be in the creative industry. And I think that view has held true for me, that anywhere where I have an opportunity to create, for me is an opportunity I embrace totally. The truth being, I think it's a privilege to be able to imagine and to have someone willing to pay for the stories that emerge from your imagination. So I refuse to be put in a box. He's a writer, or he's a filmmaker, or he's an advertising person. If it's existing in the creative industries, I am an extremely eager beaver. I think it gives me, I have to say all of this began because, one photographer in our house when I was growing up, the railway line in Fadei, chose to show me what was possible through visual storytelling. And I haven't stopped since. So I'm very grateful for every stop in that journey, especially the fact that every stop in that journey seems to prepare me for the next, because a lot of the work I do in content today and the discipline that I bring to it come from advertising. And I think people fail to recognize how specific, how intentional, how disciplined the creative process in advertising is. And I think it's important that, advertising takes its place back at the forefront of the creative industry in Nigeria, because it's got all the tools to do so. And I'm one of its products. I'm very proud of it.
Beautiful. I think you've already jumped to one or two things I was going to talk about, but that's typical of our conversations. Okay, yeah, I'm going to talk about that, but I would like to just ask you at the moment, what is the state of storytelling for us as a nation, not just advertising now, overall? Where are we? I mean, how have we traveled? Where are we and where are we headed?
I think it's good and bad. Good because in many ways we've embraced technology and embraced the opportunities that technology brings to connect our creativity and imagination on many levels across borders, into the diaspora. And that's happening with our music industry. That's why, we can now have, a creative from our industry win, the Grammys. Yeah. It's happening in the music video industry as well. You can see the embrace of technology is really doing a lot of good in terms of giving access to as many young creative people as possible. I also think, in terms of the quality of the work we're doing, I'm very impressed, and you have to be impressed with, how much young people are creating, whether it's in animation, in, all kinds of platforms are enlarging and expanding and reaching out. So the audiences for our creativity have grown in quantum leaps. My concern has to do with the content of what we are creating. I think that there is room for us to better understand the representative nature of art and creativity. The idea that in a global world, your individuality is really how representative you are of what I will call a cultural worldview. Yeah. Which is why you find the major powers of the world have come to recognize creativity as their soft power, really. The Goethe Institute, the British councils, almost every major country, major power, have a platform for advancing their cultural interests. Representation of their culture is become very important. And that filters into everything that they're doing. It filters into their diplomacy, filters into their governance, filters into the economy. And it's just not about tourism, it's also about how much who you are is represented in the stories you are telling. You can't fetch from an empty well. And the truth of it is our lack of articulation of how our diversity as a country and several cultures is actually a rich treasure trove, not a limitation, is where I think our understanding needs to grow. And it needs to grow because a lot of our young people are telling stories that are sort of lacking in any kind of representation. These are stories that could have been made in America.
Yeah.
They could be told by youth in England, but we're not English people and we're not Americans. We are all shades and colors that make up Nigeria, but there are stories that create those. Our languages, our fashion, our folklores. There are many things from our past that color how we shape our present and our future. And our storytelling is so critical in connecting the dots of all of that. That to me is maybe where our storytelling needs to mature. Because it seems like we think that the more we look like something from America, the better a chance we have of being called sophisticated or winning an award abroad. But I have been part of many of those award bodies. And the truth is, those awards are given when there is something, an alternative worldview, an alternative cultural connection is articulated and espoused concerning a general human condition.
Yeah.
Now, all stories are human, but not all stories can be told from a neutral perspective. It's important that that story is told from the worldview of your identity. And I think
I can buttress a bit of that. If I were to look at, and it's good to mention the music video, in the industry, so to say, the genre. I mean, a lot of things you see there try to mirror, Western, scenarios, Western values, and, hoping that, well, these millennials, they're all, the same. But no, I mean, because reality is the music industry is taking note of this emerging Afro-pop thing, and they're trying to put that into what they do. But meanwhile, you are trying to mirror them visually to look like who they are. But guess what? When Burna Boy did what's his name? Clarence did the video for Burna Boy's Grammy performance using the National Theater and doing all that he did, really showcasing us as a people. We were so proud of what we saw. And I think we gave a good representation of ourselves as opposed to trying to look like them. I think that's the kind of place where we are. And go to filmmaking, for instance. Roma, that one big time, 2 years or thereabout ago, gave us a different view of a human condition from a Mexican point of view. And it was such a very profound thing in black and white that dragged on, but we loved it all the same. You couldn't help but understand that human condition. I think that's perhaps what you're saying in terms of connecting the dots and showcasing ourselves. And our work being a representation of who we are and who we aspire to be as a nation. And I take a good note of that, that the work must be of a representative nature, because we don't create in a vacuum. There's a cultural thing out there. I was watching something on Al Jazeera 2 days ago on the film called The Misfits. And it was an attempt at trying to portray a particular country, Qatar, in a bad light because they had their blockade. And in between, they kept changing the story and changing the story. They had all sorts of Hollywood stars. And last minute, Qatar and the rest of the Gulf region were able to solve their problem. So they had to go back and cut again and make them look good. So just to tell you that all productions, all creative efforts will have an agenda. Agenda setting, I think, is what you're talking about for our industry. I don't think we have really been conscious of setting that agenda. You will know better in terms of how do we get out of that and make it better. But can we move closer to advertising in all of this? How are we doing storytelling-wise advertising?
Again, I'd say it's like a mixed bag of good and bad. A mixed bag of good and bad because advertising has a different kind of connection to culture in terms of, if I just look at my career, when I began in advertising in Lintas, a lot of the stories that were being told were very local. Creative directors like, Kuted Mukoro, Yori Folari, Ngozi Creek. They told stories that connected us to, the many, many sides of what it meant to be African, to be Nigerian. They leveraged many things that had to do, with tradition, with culture, i.e., things of family, things of respect for elders, things of taking care of your aged. I mean, these are all not voodoo or juju things. This is our worldview, our ethical interpretation of the world. Those were all packed into the commercials. The brands were representative of the things that we as a people, as a community believed in. The brands were part of us. And that showed in the films and the radio commercials. And some of those were made abroad. So the argument is not about whether they were made locally or abroad. It's about the storytelling itself. Yeah. I think we moved away from that at some point. I mean, back then you had Bako Super Sack. These were great local stories that built brands, from nothing to everything. There's a lot of work that had gone down in terms of the jingles. So I've always thought that when I began in advertising was ahead curve in connecting, in creating from a representative context. And then somewhere in the 80s to 90s, maybe 90s, I think we had all these foreign creative directors, and I think we were hungering for some kind of international validation. We started to call it being, global and all of that. And I think we moved away a lot, and our stories got trapped into this urbanity. This place where everybody looked perfect, where the models were all, thin and yellow, and the children looked like everybody lived in Lekki. And somehow we trapped our own storytelling into a space where we think could be validated abroad. Not everybody did that. I'm saying this as from the sense of, trends. I think those creative directors have sort of moved on, and now we have a new set of young, dynamic creative directors across board. And people like yourself, I think, are leading the way in trying to drag us back to where we came from. And I think that's a challenge today, that we try to leverage all our resources to begin to make representative art again. When I say cultural stories, I don't mean stories that end up in the bush or has drums and people wearing funny red and white. No, culture is evolving. Culture is what's going on even in the urban areas. But culture is about worldviews. It's about ethical representations. It's about the nature of our societies and how we interrelate. It's about how we prioritize things like family and spirituality and God. There are many ways in which we need our stories to begin to be, how shall I say, more healing, more enriching for our country as well. We need to begin to reprioritize how we represent wealth, success, and money inside our stories. Our stories now represent success from the perspective of whoever has it owns it. And so you will find that there is a way the young people internalize the end justifying the means at every level.
In pop culture in particular.
That's not our cultural worldview. How we represent God is interesting because we have many religions, but they all believe in God. And the way we see God cannot be as someone we leverage and exchange money for so he can give us things. We still have that in our storytelling in many ways. And I think that's the second thing. The third thing is we have many aspects of our creative industries that are doing amazing things that we need to embrace and appropriate into making advertising work. Our fashion industry is far ahead of what I see in our TV commercials and our storytelling advertising. Our music is far, far ahead of what we see inside or hear on our radio. If you look at the music video industry, the production design that you see in those things, I marvel at the level of sophistication that some of those things have. If you see work by people, people like, Kemi Adetiba, or is it Steve Gukas, so Kunle Afolayan. I mean, the work that is happening in Nollywood is not the Nollywood we used to know. And somehow we have got to appropriate the best talents and the best storytellers from all these industries into making advertising is just short storytelling.
Yeah.
And we can't keep hiring available people as copywriters or people who perhaps, used to write articles in newspapers or whatever. And once they can manage to get some dread onto their heads, they are now advertising creatives. And I have nothing against dreads. I used to wear one when, way back in the 80s. I'm just saying that it's important that we understand that those who are originating the stories are the most important assets we have. And they can't be just available people or people just growing from, the start. In every great industry in the world, the best directors, the best writers come from advertising.
Yeah.
And so for me, one way to judge, and you and I have discussed this before, is to ask yourself, these writers in my agency, how are they expressing their storytelling abilities in other forms? You have several agencies or writers who don't have a book, can't even write long stories, have never written a film, can't do, they don't write songs, they don't draw. Whereas there is a way in which, when you're an originator, a storyteller, you can't stop yourself expressing on many different levels. And I think that's very important, because we need to pay attention that way so that advertising recovers its heritage of leading within the creative industry, the best storytelling, the best storytellers, and the most representative art.
Okay, I mean, on that, I would like to just bring up something. By the way, again, it's good to have all of you on board. Some 10, 15 minutes to the end of this conversation, we'll throw it open for questions and answers. So, I can see some of you are already dropping some questions there. So thank you for that. So just drop your questions there. We'll take them as many as we can before we end this conversation. But in the meantime, I was going to build on that. You talked about technology earlier, and in particular, I'd like to focus on the social media platforms and the emergence of a new kind of content creators. The people who create the skits and the rest of them that even some of our clients go to directly or tell us to go to for them to do stuff for them. What's your take on these as an emerging industry? Is it good for us? Are there things we can learn from there? Is it all good? Are there things we can do better? And is there any room for us to embrace each other? And where would that take us?
I think it's important that we only embrace. There is something that technology is doing that I think is just going to get bigger and bigger. And the landscape is just going to get wider and wider. And emerging talents will come from irregular places. And we have to recognize that these genres will keep fragmenting. And because technology is encouraging shorter and shorter storytelling, because attention span is shorter and there's just a glut of so many places to go for stories, we have to recognize that there is nothing unique about the storyteller. The only thing that's unique is the story. And so we need to be able to aggregate and appropriate every talent that we can find who can contribute to us making or creating or originating the best stories. That's one. The second is characterization is huge now. Everybody understands and realizes that stories are beyond what's written. It's also about the kind of character that's designed. And those characters that's designed are emotionally connecting for people because you can hear them, you can feel them, you can, you can see them. There are behaviors and gestures that, connect emotionally that are not written. And it's very important that we also understand that a great character can stand and say nothing and it would still be winning. Sure. Mr. Bean is one of is a good example of that. We have to find those talented characters that representationally are able to connect and also appropriate them into the stories we're telling. But the most important thing about technology is the fact that it takes away all our limitations. Why are we not animating? Why are we not into folklores? Why are we not translating? We have a very rich literature, literary heritage. Why are we not appropriating our literary heritage? We have a great music heritage of different genres. I mean, I was absolutely amused when a young person was asking me about Victor Wifo that died and couldn't understand why there was a bit of a fuss, from people of my generation, because I told this person, this was our Michael Jackson way back when. It's important for our young people to know that they were not the first generation to create, and that there were people who have created genres of different things from way back, and we need to celebrate those. We need to bring them back, both as an educational tool for our future generation, but also the fact that back then music was also insightful. It gave you stories that allowed you to rethink and reflect. And many of us were shaped by some of the songs that, we heard back then. I think we need to appropriate all these things because technology is giving us opportunity to be able to do so. We also need to understand that technology is also helping us to create co-creation platforms.
Yeah.
I think that's also very important for us to understand, which is why I said the storyteller is not as important as the story. And we've got to understand that the capacity of this generation to do authorial creation, to curate other people's creation, or to co-curate provides a limitless, diversity of approaches to storytelling. There's a lot of folks out there who are not advertising people, but who are great storytellers. They may not even identify as creative, but if you read their entries on social media, you'd be knocked silly by how interesting, how funny, how reflective they are. We need to actually, as advertisers, reach far and wide in search of new talent. And those new talents should not they don't threaten us. We are professionals.
Yeah.
And part of being professional is recognizing where talent is of a different shade and how we can appropriate that talent to enrich what we are doing. We will always be needed, but
I would like to ask this. I'm trying to just, take it from where we've started and where we're headed. And I want to have your opinion. Would you say that today's advertising people are perhaps not brave enough to embrace what is around them? Because here you are talking about the trends in music. And those guys are fearless. They can connect with anybody, anywhere. Drake is promoting a new album and is proud to put up a billboard, about the collaboration with a Nigerian artist and all sorts of things. Davido was in coming to America too, and a whole lot of stuff going on and all that. Have we stopped being ambitious? Are we too worried about surviving? And we've forgotten about the need to extend the frontier, actually play a leadership role, as it were. I mean, that's what I'm taking from all of this. So music is growing around us. Filmmaking is growing. We were the ones, in a condescending manner, treating Nollywood like it was nothing at the beginning. But here we are. I mean, I saw King of Boys 2, amazing craft, amazing costume, amazing photography. And I looked at the credits, end credits, all Nigerians, for God's sake, So what's going on? Is it that we've stopped dreaming big and we're too much in our own world? I mean, you've been advertising and you're on the other side as well. You know everything. What do you have to say to that?
I would say this. I think that we need to work harder to interest the brand owners in the value of a little more risk-taking. I think most of our advertising creativity, in all fairness, is actually limited by the fact that those who pay for this work are often too concerned about the numbers and what the research is saying and how they think it worked previously and why they think what worked in Dubai or worked in London, America might also work here, and how we decide the what you call the foundational pillars of, oh, we want to be in music, we want to be in this, we want to be in that, and therefore we look for only the best people in that area, whoever is a star today, and we make them a brand ambassador, and then that's it. It's not much of risk taking. Creativity that is going to move the envelope has a lot of risk taking to it. I don't think our agencies are not brave. I think our agencies are forced to play it safe. And this is where it's at for advertising, because unless you've been in it like I have, you don't recognize the overarching influence of the brand custodians. And I do think, that's why I think it's important for me to address this, because a lot of the brand custodians also talk about wanting to be front and center in creativity.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that.
They want to do it without taking any risk.
Yeah.
And that to me is a contradiction in ambition. You cannot be forefront without taking risk. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we cannot be creative if we do everything in a rush. For me, when I was in advertising, we used to have meetings at Coca-Cola and some of these other top level brands where we had the meeting the night before, and then we had to submit 5 great ideas by the morning. And then we went into traffic, got to the office 4 hours later, got home at 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. the brand people are willing to say, so how many scripts am I getting before 12? The truth is the creative process also requires reflection and insight. It also requires, it requires a bit of, rumination, a bit of cross-pollination, because what then happens is we open up our Google and and we find stuff. We call it references. Basically, we steal ideas and bring it to you in the morning, because you have put us in a place where time does not allow us, the opportunity we need to actually, create something that has reflection in it. And that also happens to our productions. We end up with our productions either being trapped in Johannesburg or being trapped in Lagos. Either way, we're shooting inside houses and rooms and living rooms. Outside, we've got Mambila Plateau, we've got huge, big landscapes, we've got rivers, and we've got mountains, and we've got beautiful sceneries everywhere. We've got beaches and beachfronts, and we've got boats, and we've got planes, we've got all kinds of places to take our stories. And stories only, become an experience when we are able to enlarge the world of the viewer. If the world of the viewer is only a living room and everything is a close-up of the brand, we are not really doing much for the consumer. We're not doing much for the viewer. For us to tell better stories, we need a bit more risk-taking. We need a bit more creating time, and we need to avoid being trapped in spaces and to understand that whilst the brand is a hero, it is only a hero as long as it is an ally in the viewer's world.
Okay.
The viewer is at the center of their world. The brand is not at the center of their world. Today, the viewer is at the center of their world. And the only way the brand wins is if it is actually allied with the viewer in such a way that the stories of the viewer's ambition, existence, heritage, and all of that are the stories that you're telling. So you can't be the close-up from the first frame to the last frame. We want to actually also see a viewer whose lives are not just about, wealth and Mercedes Benzes and beautiful living rooms, but also one who is connected to the world, who understands that freedom is much more than, being able to spend what you want. That freedom is also connecting with nature. Freedom is also, values of life like family and time spent, in reflection and retrospection, and the beauty of God's creation itself are all parts of being rich.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well said. But I still think, and I'm saying this out of experience of late, yes, given a choice, the client will tell you, I want to be at the edge of my seat, I want to do this and that, but it's a different thing, taking that most important step in risk-taking, like you said. People will rather look at what is working and stick to what is working. And I can tell you this, using some recent examples with some of our businesses, I can tell that good storytelling can actually change the fortune of a brand. I've seen that happen. I've seen the client say, you know what, one of our investors was planning to divest, but seeing what you guys are doing to the brand, he's chosen to stay back. And I've seen how that brand has grown, subsequently. But I've also seen that even when that happens in that same category, the other telcos are also trying to do the same thing, and the problem of trying to do what my, whoever is doing, I think is a big problem. It's again about not taking risk, just hoping there's a formula somewhere. And if you're looking at formula as a problem, but I think there's a role for agencies that notwithstanding. Clients buy into us for our points of view, more than anything else. And I think we owe it to ourselves to satisfy, our professional calling to say, we think this way, we think that way. We've had to, as an agency, we've had to do a new production. Actually, a particular production was done and it got messed up because of interferences from client. And we had to write a new script without asking client because it wasn't working. And we had to shoot with our own resources. And we had to go to that client, taking that risk to say, hey, see what we did, because we thought that was not taking us anywhere. And they loved it. And they used it, year on year for whatever it is. But it took the agency doing that. A particular agency in the US told us somewhere in the, at Cannes, I remember that they shot a particular, they sold a particular idea to a client, I think for Budweiser, and the guy said, no, we're not going to do a commercial with a donkey, in no way, for Super Bowl. And year after year, like 4-5 years running, they will always go back after showing them all they have for that year to say, by the way, we still have this script for this donkey. They say, no way on earth. But guess what? The guys shot that thing on their own. And it was shown to that client, like, wow, we love it. And was the darling of everybody, that particular Super Bowl. So going back to what I said earlier, perhaps I'm not saying we're not brave. Maybe we need to be brave more to be able to express what we think. Otherwise, this is not going to happen.
I will say this. When I pivoted to the client on the area of risk taking, I did that because ultimately, I'm assuming an agency that's already creatively ambitious, that is already putting things on the table that the client can take a risk on. And I think that's really, just to clarify, I absolutely accept and agree with everything you're saying. But it's not that complicated to see results from those who take risks.
Yeah.
It's not that complicated to see the agencies that are doing well. It's not that complicated because in the end, even when the client is risk averse, the client is interested in success. And so you'll find that the same client that is risk averse on one front decides that he wants to go and work with the agency that is risk taking. So in the end, success, everybody loves success. And in the end, we all have to define what that success means. Does the success just mean numbers? Does the success mean some kind of emotional connection to the client? Does the success mean being representative artistically enough that we're memorable, that the people out there sing our jingles and recount the dialogue of our commercials? Do they look at the characters that we've created and use them as references? Do the things that we create, become, cultural references in themselves? Do the fashion that we design, because in the old days, people would look at the locks commercials, and they will see Patty Bolai, and they will take a picture of it and go and give their tailor to say, you know what, this
I want to
madam
look like
that. Or look at the makeup and say, why can't black be this beautiful? For me, there were many people that used advertising, to sort of live, their own daily lives. I think it's important that is the case. I think we're also in a place where COVID-19 is changing how we think of everything and how agencies must think of creativity and storytelling. Because everything that we used to also do, where if you talk about the workplace, you show an office. If you talk about, producing things, you show a factory. All those images are being redefined.
Yeah.
Now someone sitting on their bed could be in their office.
We'll be working. Yeah, why not?
Someone walking on the beach is not necessarily on vacation. So there is a rejuggling of visual imagery, and we have to sort of understand what it is that our, shall I say, visual culture is representing.
Lovely, lovely. I need to now open up for the questions. We have quite a number of interesting questions there. It reflects the fact that we've been having a very exciting conversation, I must say.
You're breaking. You're breaking. I can't quite get you right now. Okay. Uh-oh.
I'll ask the questions. We'll try and answer as briefly as we address of them. If you can. First one is from an anonymous at Global while maintaining right.
I think I've lost you. I can't hear anything. I think you're.
My network, dropped a little bit. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
So I was asking the question: how do we tell our stories with a global perspective while maintaining our cultural identity?
Well, every industry understood the transition from globalization to
Localization.
Localization. It is because the world has understood that whilst globalization gave us open markets and we can do cross-border trade, it was also important that we do not lose our identity and a sense of who we really are, because that's really the exchange that enriches both sides. There's nothing interesting in all of us being American, absolutely nothing. And like I always say, the most powerful countries are the quickest to embrace alternative cultures. They create room for it within their environment. And you'll find that the Chinese go to America and they bring Chinese culture, and they bring Chinese food and Chinese dresses and Chinese stories and that Chinese music. And the same thing happens with the Indians. It's only Africans who go to America and develop an accent in a few weeks and disappear. And I think it's very important that we understand that as something we have to pay attention to, because quite a lot of people are realizing that after they have immigrated, the children they give birth to are lost. They're not quite Americans, and they're not quite accepted as Americans, and they're not quite Africans. They're not quite Nigerians. They don't, and it's very difficult for a tree to grow to be strong if it has no roots. And it's so important because those roots are made possible by our stories. That's why you'll find people abroad who use Nollywood films to sort of train their children. At some point, you will get desperate that your child cannot speak your language. It's not a sign of civilization. It's actually a sign of poverty, of identity. And I think it's very important that is made clear, that the global environment is not looking for us to bring their story to them. They're looking for us to bring our story. And that's why Netflix came to Nigeria and immediately created a whole environment for Nollywood. It's not immediately. Why? They understand that the world is ready for African stories told by Africans that gives the world a different narrative of Africa, separate from, what's that one? The Discovery Channel. And we can't be the ones that are doing the poverty porn stuff. We can't be the ones that are doing films that, situate Africa only in jungles and with drums. And we can't be the ones as well who are doing people who only speak with accents that sound British, even though they claim to live in Lagos. I think those sorts of things are the boundaries that our storytelling needs to be, shall I say, alert to, so that we need to understand the world is waiting for our stories. They're not looking for their stories. And so we can be free to tell those stories as much as we can.
Lovely. So I'll take the next question. It's from Paul, our friend Paul Ogwagu, and says, "Hi Femi, you seem to be pained by the growing lack of originality and authenticity in our stories. Looks like our stories are being tainted and the cultural lines are getting blurred. What's the way forward here? More training, manpower, or gatekeeping?"
Well, there are four things I think is important. I think we need, first of all, in advertising, to boost the creative component of every job specification. Because there are sometimes the client service guys or the research guys, or they really are not as concerned. They see storytelling as mere products. They're there to simply make sure the client buys something, anything. And I think that's the first thing. We have to, just make sure that the creative components, everybody that is working in this thing understands that we are here not just to tell any story, but to tell a story that connects with people in a very special way, but that is representative. The second thing is for us to understand that technology can drive a lot of things. There are blurrings of cultures. That's given, because every culture is in a world where the borders are down and the trade routes are open. Of course, we're intermarrying, we are coming together. When you say someone is only Igbo today, I'm always laughing because, you know, I have friends whose in-laws are Igbo. I'm not, I mean, Yoruba is not something that is monolithic. I'm from Ondo, for instance, and there are things that the Kale people speak in a way that Ondo people don't understand or talk about your people. So really, nothing is monolithic or pure in that sense. So I'm not talking about culture as something of a particular geography. I'm talking of culture as a worldview, as an interpretative thing about who we are and the trends and ebbs and flows of the things we believe. Everybody has a worldview, and it has to do with where you grew up from. And for me, there are things that, you know, in the days when I was young, my father would write me a letter, the university would end it with Roti Omo Eniti Wonche. And it guided me, even though I was 5,000 miles away from him, and there is nothing that he can do to stop me doing whatever. But because he had implanted that in my head, it came back constantly. And such, I was very careful about where I went and what I did, because I realized that it represented him badly, not me. And I did not want to be the black sheep of the family. That's a cultural worldview.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with whether I am Yoruba or Igbo or whatever. That's really what I mean by culture. So cultures, you know, am I pained? You know, no, I'm not pained. I'm anxious. I'm ambitious. I actually think a lot of young people. I told my brother before we began that one of the things that I've learned in the last couple of years is how incredibly talented Nigerian youth are, and how powerful their creativity and their explication and their exploration of technology can be. It's not all of them whose work we can see out there. Not all of them are doing advertising, but that's why I said we have to look for them. Okay. We have to look for them.
We will have to. I'll take the final question. I can't take all the questions, sadly. But I'm going to take that question, and I'm going to end with a particularly important question, because all this is happening on the platform of AAN and LAIF Awards. And LAIF Awards is happening this year, 27th November. So we're going to talk about that briefly before we part ways. So from Biodun Adefila, she's asking a question. I totally agree with the need for reflection to craft great stories, as we've been saying all along. Hearing Mr. Odugbemi speak, client hasn't changed since his time. In asking for magic with impossible timelines. Maybe this is one of the reasons, one of the facts of life for the industry. Should we then learn to live with it, or how do we go around this challenge?
Well, she speaks from experience. I mean, when you lead an agency, you have to balance both the books and the products and create a room to move forward. I think that we have to be less reactionary. We have to create ahead of requests. We have to spend the time that we have in the agency challenging each other to create what I call creativity stems, storytelling stems that are available for us, that have the basic template of a great story that we have tested, that have the 3-arc narrative ready to run, that have characters that have been described and we know would be winning. If we only are reactive, then we are limited by the time and the budgets that we get. And I think that's really what I learned from my own, I didn't stay in advertising long, just about 13 years or so. So I really don't know the struggles as
don't tell me off again.
some of you might. But I have work, you know, where we're also creating content that may not be for clients' use. And I think it's important that I say this, and thank you, Bjorn, for taking me there. One of the things I constantly discuss with Lanre here, my brother here, is the idea that how can Nollywood be moving now billions and billions of naira, and the creative infrastructures of advertising does not have business groups that are storytellers and content creators that are not in the limitation of 1 minute. You already have the writers, you already have the production designers, you already have the artists, you already have extensive producers. Why are we not creating content with our money? Because content is king. Sure. And the content that is king is not necessarily the battleground I'm creating. There are people creating web series. We need to ensure that the creative tribe inside agencies are self-fulfilling in the work they do. When I was doing a little bit of writing and producing in agencies, I used to be incredibly depressed by the reaction of some of the clients sometimes, as in you would be depressed for a whole week because of something a client said. And if you learn to work on stuff that the client has no control over, you come to a place where your ego and your work are not living in the same flat.
Yeah.
So that when you create and he says it's the worst thing he's ever seen, you can be validated by the work that you are doing.
And you do that, people love all day.
And this is what I would say. When they see your work outside, one of the craziest things that's happened to me is that when I did Battleground, one of the clients, I shall leave the person unnamed, who used to constantly tell me how talentless I was, started sending me messages about Battleground and how much he would love to come to the set and see what we were creating, and kept saying, advertising. I just had no response for him.
Yeah, yeah. So we have to believe in ourselves more.
You have to believe in yourselves and create stuff that stand in a testament to your quality, your creativity, and in my opinion, you know, your passion. The clients see that and they gravitate. Success has many fathers.
I agree with you. I agree with you. The last thing I would like to ask you about, and we spoke about this at the beginning of the year, that this year LAIF Awards, we are recognizing and actually paying, you know, a prize for a category of award, which we call the Authentic African Stories, which, you know, tries to address all that I've been talking about, you know, the kind of stories that speak to our experiences, our recent experience that would showcase, you know, the dynamism of our culture, not the archaeological, you know, academic culture now, but work that actually speaks to us, relatable, contemporary story. You know, it's all about us. And I mean, just to let the audience know that you are curating that for us. We've spoken about that. So I would just like to hear from you. What will be your expectations? What kind of work will merit, you know, your good side, you know, so to say?
I like stuff that has, I'm assuming that we all know that the basics have to be there. The basic of obviously, you know, competence in storytelling structure, technical quality, you know, cinematography, sound. There has to be all of that because that's really the beginning. But I think there has to be insight. There always has to be insight. I think that every, you know, there has to be something that we take away from it and we say, that's interesting. So for me, it's not just about something that mirrors society, but something that interprets to us in ways that is interesting, what society is doing. So when we say authentic African, we're not just talking about drums and, you know, funny looks and stuff. We're talking about, you know, a story, you know, characters that are interesting, something that you take from our history that reaffirms our validity as a culture. I think that to me is what's important. I also really am not going to negativity, for instance, is something we want to avoid. The creative arts is actually, culture is diplomatic, something about the essence of it, that we are in fact representing and selling, an experience. And it translates economically, it translates politically, and we can't be the authors of stuff that, makes us look like we all are sorry to have been born here. We're all very excited because this place, this country, this culture was waiting for all of us to be born. So we are the ones that we are all waiting for, and we need to own it, and we need to design not just what it is, but how we sell it. What is brand Nigeria's story is really what this is about.
Okay, thank you so much, Femi. I'd just like you to leave a word or two for that young person out there. Thinking back to when I started in 1990 and when you started way back as well, and you don't know exactly what, I think the future is wonderful and it's the best time to be in our industry, but considering where the world is, COVID-19 and all the economy and all that, we need to give hope to one another. So what do you have, for that young person starting out, wondering what the future holds, being in the creative industry? As our partner?
Well, I think just be intentional. Be intentional about learning, unlearning, and relearning. I think the one thing that impacts the entirety of the creative industries is the dynamism, the speed at which things are changing. And you have to be intentional, because intentionality allows you to be observant. It allows you to constantly be open to new ideas, to read, to consume. And if there's anything I learned from the, Ronung Batogu, Dele Adetibas, Yori Folarins of this world, is the idea that a creative person that's not consuming creative products is limited. If you're a writer, you have to read widely.
You have to read and write.
Visual artists, you have to be at all those exhibitions and museums and all these things. If you're a producer, you have to be watching films and being on locations where they're creating them. Apart from your TV commercials, you have to support other people's creative instincts, because all of them combine to settle in your subconscious, so that when you have synthesized them, you create in a more superior and a more imaginative way. And that's really, for me, why I say, focus intentionally on learning, unlearning, and relearning. And I will add this just for free. Your creative ancestors are not your enemy. I've noticed that as a rule in advertising, that rather than respect those who have gone before us, rather than celebrate the work they did and how far they brought it, we degrade, we wish for them to disappear and go away. We don't understand what it means to sit at the footstool of an elder creative. And if there's anything I would leave from a cultural perspective, you lose, because the elders in the industry have a treasure trove of data that you get for free. They had to live to get it. And you can take it from where they are and take it forward. So it's better not to compete with Lanre Adisa. It's better not to compete with Julia Oku. It's better not to compete with Steve Abaiko. It's better to make them mentors, sit with them. Don't represent, a generation. I'm representing my agency, all those nonsense things that debar you from being able to access wisdom, access capacity, access dexterity. I'm sorry if that offends, but I just added that because I see it a lot.
That is you, Femi. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed myself thoroughly. We've extended to almost 10 minutes beyond our time to make up for the technical glitch we started with. But again, because it's you, Femi, also, we just have to do an extra.
I'm very grateful.
And I'm looking forward to LAIF 2021. We'll keep you abreast of all the developments. And Yes, it's been a very exciting edition of Life and Direct. We'll let you know when the next one comes around next month, most likely. Then, yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much, Femi, and everyone out there.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.